Hey yo guys, time for another video from me, the Dirty White Boy. This video isn't on it's on a specific topic here, but it's no predictions or no DVD review. It's just a special little video here just to give my thoughts on the history of Raw, Part 1, from 93 to 97. Now, Raw obviously just celebrated their 15th anniversary last Monday, even though it is a bit too soon, so a couple of weeks too soon, since the show started at the beginning of 1993, in January the 11th, 93 to be exact, so should have been like about 4 weeks away. We should have actually seen the episode, but that's beside the point. That was a great show, great memories, and it just tempted me to do this video here and make the points on the history of Raw Part 1. Now, in professional wrestling, no show has come along that's has been so influential and popular as Raw. The show started out with a new concept of having wrestling in prime time from Manhattan, New York, in the Manhattan Center, which is one of the greatest buildings in all of wrestling history. It's going to go up there with the Sportatorium in Texas, Madison Square Garden in the same state, the ECW Arena, or even the Tokyo Dome for that matter. Raw became the prime show for the replacing the Saturday show, which was Superstars, which is still one of my favorite shows, as Superstars. But the wrestling industry was in a change, and the WWF was in a downfall, and competition was brewing. The competition came from World Championship Wrestling, which was based out of Atlanta. That company was originally Mid-Atlantic, and it morphed into the NWA, and then finally morphing into WCW. WCW became strong through the backing of billionaire Ted Turner, who was always a wrestling fan, and he was very thankful how pretty much wrestling made his WTBS Superstation so successful, because wrestling was a cheap show to run and it gave them great ratings, so he's always thankful for that. Turner, he put his money where his mouth was in 1995 when he gave Eric Bischoff a Monday night time slot on one of his Turner Network, TNT, between the hours of 7:57 and 9 o'clock. Bischoff and WCW had the advantage of being live every week as opposed to Raw, which was taped every other week, where they would give away the ratings or the results of the show so you wouldn't have to keep channel surfing, which is, even though it's a dirty tactic, it's a genius idea. Like I said, it prevents you from channel surfing. Also, they were incorporating a mix of Vince's talent from the 80s in the WWF with the likes of Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, Lex Luger, who had just been established and jumped over, and even Hacksaw Jim Duggan for that matter, and incorporated them with the built-up stars in the NWA, like Ric Flair, Sting, and Arn Anderson. And he also incorporated that with a mix of talent that was making a name for themselves in countries like Mexico and Japan, and Philadelphia and ECW, and even though ECW wasn't even a mainstay yet, they were still getting their name out there in the industry. The result of this was real competition, something fans had been craving for, because the WWF was going downhill at this time. It became boring and stale a bit. I mean, 94 was their last real good year, but there was no real competition there until Hulk Hogan arrived and the Monday Night Wars emerged. Fans had been craving this for years, and became huge, forcing Vince McMahon, to change Raw up and get more hungry. Bischoff was presenting pay-per-view quality matchups weekly, where McMahon, he was still using Monday Night Raw to build up for his upcoming pay-per-views. And suddenly TV ratings were just as important as house show numbers and pay-per-view buy rates. And all of a sudden, Tuesday afternoon became a bragging contest between the WWF and WCW to see who was getting the biggest time slot, the biggest appreciation between the fans, between WWF and WCW. WCW only got better with the NWO storyline in mid-1996 and would run roughshod over the WWF for the next 84 weeks in a row. Like, that's a hell of a time. You gotta give them props there. WCW also had an array of undercard talent with the likes of Rey Mysterio, Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, Chris Jericho, Psychosis, and Juventud Guerrero, and Billy Kidman for that matter. And they were able to blow away wrestling audiences with wrestling we had not seen in the U.S. And for North America for that matter, and some parts of the main events had big-name talent with less stellar in-ring work, but the fans were so appreciative of WCW's undercard that they forgave that. And even though the problems that they had constant no finishes on their main events, the fans, they were, like I said, they were forgiving, and this problem eventually would plague WCW in the later stages of their company. But WCW was unstoppable from 1996 to 98. The WWF, they were going through an identity change as a sports team does when they keep losing. They just eventually rebuild and going for the cup, like in football or hockey or baseball. The turning point after they hit rock bottom, which was then, the turning point changed in 97 when it was decided that the WWF would change its Walt Disney appeal that they had had since pretty much the and go more edgy, more MTV, more teenager-ish, and go more edgy. Because McMahon, he gave up booking control to a magazine, a guy who used to write for their magazine named Vince Russo, who took the company into the 18 to 34 demographics with heavy emphasis of blood, chair shots, profanity, and scantily clad women. And any way to get a rating for that matter. The WWF had found their star, and they'd been looking for an ex-WCW talent who instantly became the top draw in the company in Stone Cold Steve Austin. And with a variety of talent in their solid undercard, such as The Rock, who was an ex-CFLer and found his way into wrestling and had the great heritage there. Another former WCW talent that they just gave up on in Triple H. And once again, another former WCW talent and ECW star Mick Foley, with a formula that intrigued audiences by being unique and intriguing. During the summer of 1997, the WWF had a better show, but WCW would still reign in the ratings war. It was not until April of 98 when Raw finally won, in large part to the Austin McMahon storyline, where McMahon was the evil owner after the Montreal Screwjob, and Austin became the anti-hero, and this was in fact the very first in-ring meeting between Stone Cold Steve Austin and Vince McMahon, where Dude Love interfered and ruined it. As the WWF entered the 1998, the wrestling world would change rapidly, and Raw would cement its legacy during the start of the Attitude Era, an era where only one company would survive. And that's part one of it. I will probably have part two soon. I don't know when, but I will do part two in the not too distant future. But anyway, guys, that's it for now. I'll hit you with my predictions for WWE's Armageddon tomorrow, and now I'm out, so peace.